Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, we return to Venice for a folk saint of roistery. The last time we visited mythic Venice, we found a representative of the infernal, so it's fitting, perhaps, that this time we add a saint. He's not one of the great saints, like Mark, or a locally potent but slightly pagan saint, like Giustiana. He seems to be a folk saint, supported by a bishop at the insistence of his living sister. This is not how sainthood works. You really can't just claim it for a person by force of finance. The current method of checking for miracles is not in place in period, but you still need a local cultus and a tradition of miracles to be recognised by the church as a saint. That being said, the church itself says that there are a heap of saints that they don't know anything about. These are the saints which are venerated on All Hallows. Perhaps this young man's suffering expiated his sins sufficiently for him to find exceptional grace. Time to hand over to a younger version of myself, reading from The Lives of the Dogeresses by Edgecombe Staley. This is from a section late in the 16th century, but I'd include it because we need more interesting NPCs. The Doge at the time was Antonio Venier. There was, however, a thorn, and a very sharp one too, in Antonio Venier's career. It was one which sprang out of his own branch of the family tree. Alois, or Luigi, his eldest son, was, if not a ne'er-do-well, a very wild sort of lad. Probably the serenity of the life at the ducal palace paled upon the youth who sought relief in romantic attachments. Among his escapades was one, in company with his friend, Marco Loredan, which compromised the fair fame of Madonna Felicita, the wife of Messer Giovanni della Boccole, a rosebud and a thorn. Messer della Boccole discovered the intrigue and watched his opportunity for chastisement, but the gay Lotharios anticipated his purpose, and in a moment of peculiar sportiveness, it was midnight, the 11th of June, 1388, they stuck up, over Messer della Boccole's front door, a phallic symbol, and scribbled upon the lintel some opprobrious words. Such an insult was intolerable, and as the culprits did nothing to conceal their identity, nor make amends, della Boccole complained of their conduct to their respective fathers. How Marco's father acted we do not know, but Doge Venier visited his son's offence with the severity of a Brutus. The lad was put on his trial before the Signori della Notti, the police court of Venice. A fine was imposed of 100 lire and 2 months' imprisonment in the Pozzi, where only political prisoners were confined. Horrible, dark, damp cells that would make the saddest life in the free light and air seem bright and desirable. So wrote George Eliot in 1860. In this terrible place of confinement, with a steady depth of 2 feet of stagnant putrid water, the only dry rest his hard bench, which did duty for table and for bed, poor Alvis lost heart and health. He pleaded desperately with his father to release him from his terrors and his infirmities, but the Doge gave no reply and made no sign. He was, he plumed himself, the impersonation of all that was just, honourable, and unimpeachable in Venice, and not for his own offspring could he suffer any relaxation of the sentence. His son had transgressed the law, he must abide by the consequences, so he ruled. And the consequences, in spite of his mother, the Dogeressa Agnesi's impassioned intercessions, were that the young man, left to his fate, died miserably in the filthy Gehenna in the springtide of 1388. This was the parental justice of the urbane and gracious Antonio Venier, but the thorn pierced his own hand and heart, and after 2 years of useless remorse and self-accusation, the unnatural, if judicial Doge passed away in mental anguish in the Palazzo Venier e Giusiosti near the Ponte dell'Acquavita. There is quite a touching little story which concerns the burial of poor Alvis Venier. The sister who loved him best, Antonia, was so greatly distressed by her father's attitude that she professed herself a canoness of San Zaccaria, and when her brother's dead body was refused decent burial by the Doge, she obtained possession of it and carried it away from the foul Casa degli Spiriti, where all the dead rest before their final course to San Michele, the common cemetery, and placed it reverently in an unoccupied piece of land on the fondamento of Cannaregio, the most distant sestiere from the ducal palace. Directly the Doge was dead, she put into effect a resolution she had made, after earnest prayer to St. Mary, St. Justina, and the good Bishop Lodovico, her patron, to build a church and a canonica, and dedicate them in the name of her brother as St. Alois. In the crypt she buried him, and by her will directed that her own dead body should be laid beside his. Alas, The Orto Botanico, where, when not beset by picnic parties of bird lovers at the neighbouring aviaries of St. Giobbe, devout Antonia Venier meditated and prayed, and when she watched her church arise, has lost all traces of its original condition, and is now a torpedo factory. I must say I disagree with Staley there. I think that the sacred site of the patron of the shockingly unexpected phallic object being turned into a torpedo factory is oddly fitting, but your saga may vary.